Private property is no longer existent in America.
What's wrong with America right now?
You can no longer save in the currency of our nation. It has now cost them more money to print a penny than the penny is actually worth itself. The majority of the politicians that were telling me that Bitcoin was a bad thing were getting filthy rich. If you buried $1 million in your backyard at just a 7% debasement value over the next 100 years, $1 million that you would probably work your entire life away to accumulate, won't be able to buy your son a new iPhone.
Is there any chance that America will, as you said, wake up and turn the tide and do something similar than El Salvador?
What would another 4 years of treason look like? It would be the end of America. For the first time in human history, man has created something that's incorruptible, beyond the reach of the most powerful tyrannical governments in world history. They create the crisis, and then in comes the government to save the day. If you start adopting Bitcoin and studying Bitcoin, you will be able to look back and pinpoint an exact moment in your life when everything changed for the better.
How long are you actually in the Bitcoin community, like in the online presence also?
I would say that this is my first year being fully in the Bitcoin. And by that, I mean Bitcoin, not crypto. I got in originally. The first time I think I ever bought Bitcoin was in 2013, 2014, was with a buddy at a party. My buddy was that crazy guy who, was always into the cool stuff. And he asked if I wanted to go halves on him on a couple Bitcoin. And I think I threw in $500 and, he bought us 4 Bitcoin back then. So whatever year it was when Bitcoin was around $250. But we had it on Mt. Gox, or he had it on Mt. Gox. It was my best friend from high school that I grew up with. I mean, we were in diapers together. So one of those guys you can just trust to give, $500 to and let him hold on to your Bitcoin back then. And then Mt. Gox happened. And then we lost everything. And at the time, I didn't really even know what Bitcoin was. I just given a buddy of mine, some money, and he'd send me some text back then when we still had like the flip Nextel phones, and was just sending me like screenshots, or not even screenshots, but just like messages about how the price of Bitcoin. And then we lost it all. And then in 2015, I was in college, and it was exam night, and I had slept through like the beginning of exams, like you go into class and they basically read all the answers. And I was so tired because I was working 2 jobs in full time. And anyways, long story short, I slept through the exams, or the pre-exam where we studied for it. And then which made it so we had open book. So it was like you only got 3 exams, so you had to pass that one to pretty much pass the class. So I was open book. I was there so long that it gave him enough time to go home, pick up his Bitcoin miner, and come back. It was like an electrical engineering motor class or something like that. I forget exactly what class it was, but he was showing the professor this Bitcoin miner. And after I finished the exam, I was asking him a few questions. He's like, yeah, I just basically plugged this thing in and I paid the electricity, but it mines me Bitcoin. I'm like, oh, how much Bitcoin are you making? He's like, oh, I'm mining about $400 a month. And I go, wait, so, I'm scratching my head. I'm going, you're paying $200 a month in electricity, and this thing's making you $400. I go, how much do you pay for the machine? I think it was like $500 at the time. And or maybe $600. And I go, wow, so after 3 months, this thing basically pays itself off. And then it is literally just making you $200 a month profit. I go, could you build 2? And he goes, yeah, as long as you can get the power to keep running them, He's like, I had something about, contacting his local energy company and had to come out and make some modifications, but he was also growing weed at the time. So he had already upgraded his home to be able to support that workload of power. And he's like, yeah, but Bitcoin's old technology. They got this thing called Ethereum, and that's what you really want to be mining. Well, it's Ethereum, And I don't know if it was you or me and talked about, we'll go into that in a minute, but I'll finish the story. So I'll go in a ton of different directions. But, so he's like, oh, well, I tell everybody this, and, nobody, I'm just going to waste my time. I'm just, talking on dead ears. He goes, but if you're serious about it, let me know. I'll help you, get the stuff you need to build your first miner. And I go, well, where can I get it? Can I order it online? He goes, yeah, you can order it online. And I go, all right, what's the site? He goes, oh, it's Newegg. And I go, they got an app? He goes, yeah. So I pulled out my phone. I downloaded the app. I said, put everything in the cart. I'll buy it right now. He goes, bro, if you're serious, he goes, you buy it right now. He goes, I'll let you bring it over to my house. And he goes, I'll build the first one with you. 15 minutes later, a few $1,000s later, I'd ordered all the parts and had this Ethereum miner built in a week. And that was back when Ethereum was still $2.65. So I'd started mining Ethereum at $2.64, actually, to be exact. And the thing was mining me 3.5 coins of Ethereum a day. It was like $7.50. And that was back when you just had a computer. This is when motherboards were first coming out with the ability to put 2 graphics cards on them. Like nobody was doing the 6-card graphic card miners yet at the time. And then, so I was like, wow, I was only spending like $3 a day in electricity, and it was making me $7, kind of like what he told me, right? I was like, oh, this is awesome. So then I went out and built another one. And then by the time, that was a couple weeks, 3 weeks later. So I got the second one on, And now I'm mining 4.5 Bitcoin, but I built 4.5 Ethereum, but I built 2 of the same computer, right? So I was like scratching my head, like, why the hell? And there was no YouTubes, there was no sailors, there was nobody explaining us the difference between a shitcoin and what Bitcoin was. It was like the wild, wild west back then. And I just couldn't wrap my head around. I didn't know what difficulty was. I didn't understand that the more people that got online, the harder it would become to mine theirs. And I never comprehended that so many people are getting on and mining at the same time. So then I was like, okay, well, maybe this, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but screw it. I'm still making money. So I'm going to go build 2 more. And then I went and built out 2 more, right? And then I got to about 5 coins a day. And then by the time I got the 5th one, I was back down to about 3.5 coins a day. And now I have 5 of these things running in a condo, and I'm the upstairs unit. So it was great in the middle of winter. I could have my door wall open and snowflakes would be blowing through the screen and my condo would be like 80 degrees or 85 degrees. But in the summer, so then now fast forward, this is probably 4 or 5 months later, it's getting to spring. It's about April time and you get that first warm day in the spring. And I came home, my condo was like 102 degrees. Like you couldn't even, it was like insane sauna. And that's when I realized I was like, oh yeah, this is, you have to have a facility to do this in. And so then I kind of scaled it back and that was kind of how I got into crypto.
And now no mining running, right?
No way, my friend. Nope.
Now you need some, now you have to be actually professional with it. And you also have a show where you talk not only about Bitcoin, but you also talk about politics, America and stuff like that. And I really like the going out of the Bitcoin bubble. I talk always about Bitcoin. So I'm always interested in the topics that are related to Bitcoin, kind of touch on Bitcoin. But it's not only just about Bitcoin. And today we would like to discuss a topic of America and what's wrong with America, and also like where do you see America, and maybe also like the world in a bigger scale. But let's first focus on America. What's wrong with America right now? And you also had a show which was called Wake Up America. Let's start with that. Like, what's wrong with America right now? Do you see it in a wrong direction, drifting, and yeah?
Yeah, man. So I do my new political show is on LFA TV at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's called Matter of Fact. That's probably my biggest one, where we have the biggest audience. And so when was the FTX collapse? I think that was in 2022, right? So
yeah.
I think prior to Trump coming into office, and some things I'll be really specific about what I say, and I really have to watch myself because I know you're going to put this out on YouTube, and there's just certain things that I can't say so I'm going to really have to tiptoe around this. But basically, we had Trump, and me as an American, I kept working harder, right? Went to school, right? Well, let's start from the beginning, right? So I was like, I'd explain the Ethereum stuff. I was working full time, and then you're watching these gurus like Gary Vaynerchuk or Tony Robinson, or name your motivational speaker, right? They're always telling you got to get a side hustle. You got to be able to work harder than everybody else. You got to work longer than everybody else. And if you just do it consistently for long enough, you can be successful. So ended up going and starting at an employer where I could be a temp, but I knew that they would pay for my college. I knew that once I got hired in, it was a great job, a great place. You could support a family on the income. So I did all the things. I went back to school. I got my school paid for, got a college degree, became an engineer, put money in my 401k. And over the course of a 4 or 5 year period, I went from making $10 an hour basically to making over 30. And my standard of living didn't change. So prior to even Trump, right, I wasn't big into politics. At one point, we'll get there. I'll just keep going. So we didn't know, and I just didn't understand. And I think even when Trump got elected, I voted for Trump, but I didn't know why. I didn't have a reason. I didn't have a dog in the fight, right? We just kind of, in America, we were raised that you don't talk about 3 things. You don't talk about religion, politics, or money with your family. Like that's the 3 things that we were raised on. And so that's kind of always been a thing. So we heard Trump, and you'd be watching if you lived in America, and you'd see like the fake news. You heard Trump say these things, but as an American, like we didn't really fully understand that there was propaganda. We didn't understand what the media lied. We kind of trusted our government. We thought that our government was actually here to help us and support us and wanting us to better our lives. And we didn't understand those things. And it wasn't until Trump kind of pulled that veil back and opened our eyes. And even then, not a lot of us noticed it, but I was still so big into crypto then. I had my crypto show. I was getting close to like 100,000 subscribers. I think at the time might have been like 80. And that's when the FTX collapse happened. And at that point, I had started to learn a little bit about politics, and I was kind of learning how, political and foreign policy and things that our government does. When the Fed's going to print money, they're going to expand the balance sheet. They're going to start quantitative easing or quantitative tightening and rate hikes. And I started to learn how that affected Bitcoin price, right? So you get a little bit more information. You can make a little bit better trades. You can be a better investor. You can be more educated. And then FTX collapsed. And for the first time, I'm watching Fox News, or I guess the quote Republican side of things, telling us that this guy's Bernie Madoff. He's a mini Madoff. And then I have the other news, which is telling us that he's just a kid and he just made a mistake. Oh, whoops, he stole $32 billion from investors. Like, oh, could have happened to anybody. He didn't mean it. He's just a kid. And that's when you really start, right? And then I'm sure a lot of your audience probably heard of BitBoy crypto. But at the time, like BitBoy went full off the rails. He was flying down to the Bahamas and like holding protests and flying subscribers down there and like really tracking down leads and tracking down information. And that's when you heard for the first time that, the Bahamas government was getting their carbon credits from basically the World Economic Forum or whoever you want to call this, really elite people that are going to dish out these carbon credits. And the Bahamas government was going to give their $8 billion worth of carbon credits to Sam Bankman-Fried. And they were going to use that to backstop FTX. So there would have never been a run on everybody's Bitcoin when we had $8 billion worth of carbon credits, or an entire market, or billions and trillions of dollars, maybe even worth of carbon credits. I mean, he would have been able to basically manipulate Bitcoin to zero. And that's when I really woke up and I go, okay, something's wrong here. So then I started researching on Trump, right? I wanted to learn more about this president. I want to hear some of his speeches. So I went to and got on YouTube for the first time to search, and I said, best Trump speech. And I clicked on it. And of course, an ad prompts up, a 1-minute ad before I could even watch the interview of Trump or the speech of Trump. That was an ad of Hillary Clinton just ripping Trump apart. And I go, whoa, man, like, this is the ex-president of the United States. He's been deplatformed from every social media platform. And that was before our country really rallied back behind him. So I was just watching this and I couldn't wrap my head around it. I was like, oh my gosh, like they've brainwashed us into hating this man. And he loved our country, and he loved America. And I think he loved us. And that's when I decided to, okay, like I was watching what party was winning, and it was Democrats by a long shot. And I know that they hate crypto, right? I know that they despise it. They're super against crypto. So at that point I go, if enough of us don't wake up in this country and start getting involved, the party that hates crypto is going to completely destroy it. And so then that's how I got into politics. And we can kind of go from there. If you have any questions, I know I have kind of a long rant, but that's kind of when I realized our country needed men to stand up and just speak truth and just be honest and try to get that information out to the masses.
And that's amazing. And what do you expect for the current elections? Like, I think as European, you always get a little bit of a different view on America. I feel like when I talk with people online from America, and when we talk to like actual Americans about America, it's different than mainstream media. It's always different. So I like to go to the first source I can possibly find. Like, what's your outlook on the election that's coming out now?
I don't think our country's ever been in a worse position than we're in right now. Whether you believe the previous elections were the most secure and legit elections, when there's mountains of evidence in front of you that'll show you proof of the contrary. So the people that did that in 2016 did it in 2020. They did it in 2022, and none of them have been held accountable. And you're seeing the complete destruction of what was once the greatest nation in the world. Our crime rates are at all-time highs. Women are no longer safe to walk down the streets in almost every single major city. Men are literally just jacking women in the face, just walking down the street. If you are a woman by yourself, you are in danger in every single major city. We have a migrant crisis. We've allowed on the conservative estimates, say 20 to 30 million migrants. The truth from people that go down to the border like me are telling you it's 50 million. 80% are military age males. So that means we've let 40 million military age males into this country. And even if 1% of those have malicious intent, you are talking of hundreds of thousands of very violent, angry people that come from countries that don't have 911, if that makes sense. So when things go bad, their first instinct is not to call the cops. Their first instinct is to get violent. And then you have a portion of them who have children, who have raised these children in third world countries where the gangs are the rule of the land. And it's you steal from me, we chop off body parts, or we just, do really bad things to you. And these kids are getting initiated into these things at 8, 11 years old, right? And they're raised that way. So when your child is now being forced to go to school with somebody because your government has forced that person to accept them, and a fight breaks out, you end up having kids that put pencils through the other kid's eye, and it gets very violent and very dangerous. I think that's really where our country is headed. It's not in a good shape, and none of the people that are in charge or positions of power seem to want to hold anybody accountable. And they're robbing us blind, Robin. They really are. They are looting our treasury at a rate that we've never seen before in history. Private property is almost non-existent. We have migrants now that have squatter rights. So if you have a property in America and somebody can break into your property, even if it's for a week or a day or 2 days, they can basically break into your house. They can create a fake document that says somebody, and it doesn't even have to be anything provable. They can literally print this thing out of their own computer at home, fake a few dates and signatures, and say that they've been in this place for 30 days. And if they can show any fake proof that they've been in your place for 30 days, that you now have to take them to court, which can take up to 2 years for you to forcibly remove these people that have broken into your house. So private property is no longer existent in America. You can no longer save in the currency of our nation. It has now cost them more money to print a penny than the penny is actually worth itself. And so I'm not too hopeful for 2024 election, to be honest. I think our civilization is on the brink of collapse. And then now you add in the wars and everything else that's going on. I think we're setting ourselves up for some major terrorist attacks that are probably going to get carried out on USA soil.
I hear that more and more, and I'm always wondering, like, there's this Ray Dalio. You probably are familiar with Ray Dalio and his fear with rising and falling states and empires. Is that the reason why this is like, is America just like because it was there and it's going down now? It was just like nature bring that? Is that fiat currencies? What do you see as like the root cause of all of that? Because I think politics and what people are doing is like an secondary consequence of some root cause, something underlying, something that's wrong. What do you see as that?
The money, my friend. I think any Bitcoiner really starts to understand it. The second that you start investing in Bitcoin and you put in your first $100 and it turns into 110, and then it goes down to 20 cents, we ride those cycles. But in the period where you're putting wealth into something and it's going up, and you put a little bit more and it goes up, and then it really forces you to understand how money works. Like, what is money? And I think Robert Breedlove and Seyr do the best explanation of, I think they call it the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin vortex is a really good way to put it, or the 5 key characteristics of money, right? Like, what do you want your money to be? You want it to be divisible, durable. I'm sure you've explained it to most of your audience already knows. I won't repeat them all, but our money system is broken. And that means that we've given the ability, and Jeff Booth probably said it on your podcast as well, when you can convince an entire nation that a 2% inflation rate is a good thing, when by design a free market is deflationary, you've now basically given yourself or stolen, you give yourself the ability to steal 2% of the nation's wealth every year for all of eternity. So no matter how much better you're doing in life, when you have that force that's literally stealing a percentage of your wealth every single month, on top of, and I don't know what your guys' tax rate are, but on my show this morning, I just interviewed the guy from Decrypt Tax, and he focuses on all crypto taxes. I said, well, what are we actually paying? Like, how much in the taxes are Americans paying? Because I've heard between 43 and 53%. And he goes, that's spot on. So our government is literally taxing you between property tax, sales tax, income tax, your death tax, your mortgage, your everything, your what do they call it? The inheritance tax, everything. It's like 53%, man. So how can a nation ever thrive when your government's taking that much from you?
Yeah, it's I think Austria has the third highest tax rate in the European Union, something like that. Like the European Union in general is like quite high, and Austria is also really high. The politicians get paid. The Austrian president gets paid more than the American president. Stuff like that. It's ridiculous what's going on in Austria with how much the politicians get actually paid. But that's just like for, for me. The main thing that Bitcoin is actually fixing is the property rights. When you actually have the property rights back, and you touched on it before with the houses and stuff like that, and when you can actually own it, and Bitcoin can actually be that thing that you can actually own and nobody can take it away from you. Of course, like we always have this example, someone can sit in front of you with a gun and still shoot you when you don't when you don't give them your Bitcoin. But in the same time, you can take the decision to take it to your grave. Nobody can force Bitcoin out of you. If you have a house, it's really easy to take it away from you. If you have gold, it's really easy to take it away from you. I mean, gold may be a little bit more difficult because you can hide it somewhere really complicated and people have to know where it is. So in that way, it's better than a house, because a house, you cannot hide a house and you can take a house. But Bitcoin is this one property that gives us back property rights, and this will change a lot. And before we get into Bitcoin too much, I want to first get your view on like how did when you heard about politics and all those stuff that we talked about before, how did this influence your thinking of Bitcoin? How did this like influence your opinion and or like strengthen your opinion on Bitcoin?
You know, it drastically strengthened it because the majority of the politicians that were telling me that Bitcoin was a bad thing were getting filthy rich. So let me just rattle off a few of these. This is our government. Insider trading is illegal in America. I don't know if you've ever heard of Martha Stewart. She was like the grandma who like baked cooked goods and like teach you how to make like homemade mac and cheese. And she had like a cooking show. And she sold some stocks a while back. This was probably 5 or 10 years ago. And they sent grandma to prison for a couple of years. Well, in the last year in 2023, Rep. Brian Higgins, Democrat, his stock portfolio plus 238%. So let me put this before I rattle these off into perspective. People like Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio and the best investors in the world, maybe 10, 15, good year 20. So check this out. Mark Green, Republican, 122%. Garrett Graves, 107%. David Rouser, 105%. Steth Moulton, 80%. Ron Wyden, Democrat, 78%. John Rutherford, Republican, 69%. And the list goes on. I have a list on my screen right here of about 35 members of our government who have out traded just this year the best traders in the world that have algorithmic trading software. Like, there is no way that you do this without inside information. And these people regulate markets and regulate an industry. So we have a system set up in America now where the regulators are protecting you from the people that are stealing your money. So the system is so broken. And when that system and those people are telling me that I shouldn't be buying Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is dangerous, or criminals use Bitcoin, I think that they are the best sounding board for Bitcoin. And I think global adoption as a whole, watching what's happening to the United States, I think is going to play a major impact. I think it'll be taught to children for generations and generations to come about what's being done into America, how corrupt our money system is, and how you can grow in 4 years from energy independent and one of the greatest nations in the world, peace by strength. How much more peaceful was the world 4 years ago? I mean, we are on the brink of World War III with like 4 different nations now, all of which have nuclear powers and capabilities. So yeah, I think it's, to answer your question, I think it's done a lot to wake me up, and I think it's waking up a lot of Americans.
But you're still in America, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you see any countries where you're like this? They're doing way better. This should be a role model for America.
El Salvador, I think, is the shining example of what happens. And at the basic, I was watching a lot of people like Eric V. Stacks. If you haven't interviewed Eric V. Stacks, man, he would be a great guest for your podcast.
He was already on. He's
he was
amazing. Yeah, I loved him.
Yeah, so your audience knows Eric's he's a top G, man. That guy is a wealth of knowledge, and he came back from El Salvador and he said at the end of the day, what Bukele is doing is he's just restoring property rights to the people. He's giving the people the ability to store their wealth in a currency that no government's going to take away from you. He's using the government as a show of force to protect your property and to keep you safe, which was what your government's supposed to do. Seeing the, he's going to get attacked by a lot of these other higher powers these people don't want El Salvador to succeed. And seeing that the gang violence that broke out a couple of weeks ago, and then he sent 1,000 soldiers after 2 people. There was some type of gunfire or fight or some type of gang retaliation, and he sent 1,000 soldiers after these people. Like, imagine being a citizen and thinking like, gangs are coming back, and then boom, all of a sudden, like, your brother and his cousin in this huge, you get in a fight in school and you're getting picked on by a bully. And then all of a sudden, like, your brother shows up, your cousin shows up, and you have this big show of force around you. It's like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like you now are kind of protected, and that bully's not going to want to come after you again. And I think that that's what he's doing. But at the end of the day, it's basic human property rights. And that's what he's providing for his citizens. And I think that you go from a country like America where our politicians are stealing 10% of your wealth every year. That's what our currency is getting debased right now, is about 10% per year. And then let's just say worst case scenario, Bitcoin only gains at 14% a year. Do you understand the difference? Like, if you buried $1 million in your safe today in your backyard, you gave your kids $1 million, you went and dig a hole and you buried it there at just a 7% debasement value over the next 100 years, that $1 million will only be able to buy your children $891 worth of stuff today. So that $1 million that you would probably work your entire life away to accumulate won't be able to buy your son a new iPhone. He might be able to get the mini or the knockoff version or an Android something, but he ain't getting the iPhone Max. So, I mean, just do the simple math, and then imagine going from that to 14% positive per year. I mean, it's astronomical, my friend.
Is there any chance that America will, as you said, wake up and turn the tide and do something similar than El Salvador? Of course, I know El Salvador is completely different than America. They have to do, even if they want to take El Salvador as a role model, they have to do a lot of different stuff. It's also a way bigger country. There's a lot more implications to that. But is there a chance that America will turn the tide in like the next 5, 10, 20 years? Or is it like such an other network effects and the directions so put in place that it's basically non-reversible?
I think it's going to be painful. I think it's going to take the right leader that's willing to completely see. That's the hard part. We have election cycles every 4 years. So the nicest part with our next cycle is that Trump only has 4 years. And if that man makes it back into office, even if we don't have the economic boom, and he just, he has to make policies that make sure that what's happening to America today never happens again. And we have to get the right people in office. It's a massive government. But if you just take a look at the election results of 2020 and you see that 75 million people voted for Trump out of the, I think we're down to like 320 million is the population of the United States, 360 million. And then you take a look at Gen Z, and Gen Z makes up 70 million. So I would say that there is 150 million people in America that could transition to Bitcoin like that, right? So I do think that we are watching the Great Awakening. I don't know if you can censor the internet enough. We have things coming out like Nostr, which I think is extremely important to what this world's going to go through for the future of humanity in general. But I think that if there's anything that the United States has ever been good at, it's been removing tyrannical regimes from power. And the American people aren't fully pissed off enough yet to make that leap forward. But keep pushing us, keep backing us into a corner, and eventually something's going to break. Whether that is a terrorist attack that happens on USA soil and it is carried out by somebody that broke into this country illegally, or even worse, was ushered into this country. I mean, our government's taxing citizens, and they're now paying for migrants to live. They're paying for their healthcare. They're paying for their food. They're paying for their housing. And now they just started passing out $1,000 to $10,000 prepaid debit cards that automatically renew every month. So if you're an illegal immigrant, you break into our country, you are now getting rewarded with a prepaid visa that's bought and paid for with our tax dollars. And we have homeless veterans who have literally lost siblings in war, fighting to defend this country. And those veterans are now sleeping on the streets and are homeless because our government's more worried about taking your tax dollars and giving them to somebody who broke the law and illegally entered this country.
Massive. Maybe I'm showing my not native speaker skills here, but what's USA soil? I heard it 2 times now.
USA soil, it means like on our ground, like inside the United States borders, right? So like whatever, we butt up to Mexico, we butt up to Canada, so it's just like right here. This is our, I guess, our God-given, our birthright, our nation, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, really cool. You brought up Nostra, which is also really interesting. You are extremely active on social media. You are on Rumble, you are on YouTube, you are on Twitter. I don't know if you're on Nostra also. What did you thought of Twitter files? What did Twitter and Elon Musk do to social media, and how do you see like the future going forward? It's like, I feel like there's a lot of positive change slowly coming, especially if Elon Musk pushing more freedom of speech. It's not 100% on Twitter, but it's way more than before. It's not perfect, but it gets in the right direction. I don't know, but the other platforms, they probably are not better than before. But if Twitter actually succeeds on this mainstream platform and like can push also the other platforms to have more policies like that, what do you see as the social media side of things? Because the land in America is one thing, but social media is where all the things happening globally. So that's a really interesting and really important thing.
I think it's probably the most important, freedom of speech, right? It's your First Amendment. So out of all the things that our founding fathers fought for, right, and they thought of importance, your First Amendment, your ability to speak freely is so important. And watching all these social media platforms and what they do with shadow banning and limiting content, as far as the Twitter files go, that was still at a point where I think most of our country was under the same assumption. We just have to expose these people, right? We just need the rock solid evidence, the proof that proves what we thought was happening is actually happening. And I personally thought that the Twitter files were going to be it. I thought like, okay, boom, this is it. This is going to be the time where enough Americans wake up and they realize, and they're so pissed and so fed up with it. This is where we draw that line. Nothing changed, buddy. Nothing changed. I mean, more and more evidence came out. More and more corruption was exposed. And yet, to this day, not one person held accountable. And I can't even say what I want to say over here because it's going to get your channel in trouble. So like that's the saddest part about all this. We can't even have an open conversation as two adults and speak freely because we're going to be putting this content out on a platform that will do everything humanly possible to prevent people from hearing the truth.
I told you a lot about 21 Bitcoin, the best place for me to buy Bitcoin directly on a Bitcoin only exchange. But now let's talk about how to secure your Bitcoin. Once you got Bitcoin, you don't want to leave them on exchange. You want to take self-custody. You want to take responsibility of your own Bitcoin. That's why I recommend getting a BitBox. BitBox is an amazing wallet where you can not only keep your Bitcoin in a simple way, very secure, you can even create a passphrase. With that passphrase, you can basically create a hidden wallet on the device itself. Make sure to buy your BitBox in the link down in the description, and with code Robin you even get a 5% discount. And especially with the Twitter files, it was scary because when you saw everything on Twitter and all the platforms, like basically just Twitter, and then you watched what mainstream media is saying about it, and then you're like, oh, they're not saying anything about it. I don't know if I did not hear it, but I had nothing covered on mainstream media, and I was actually searching for it, and I don't know if it was a little bit covered in America, but here in Europe, I did not see anything.
No, man, it's part of that problem is the fact that we've allowed foreign nationalists to buy themselves on the board of directors. Now, I don't know how your stock market or companies work in the country that you're from, but in America, the top 8 shareholders of any company pick the board of directors, right?
Mm.
So Warren Buffett, people think that this guy's an investing genius, you know, and if you just stay in the market long enough, you'll be rich, and it's the great way to go about things. But he didn't, right? Him, Charlie Munger, and a few other people would each buy massive shares of a company that was really truly undervalued, and that would give them enough control of the board to push the company in whatever direction that they wanted it to go, how they would spend marketing, how they would staff. And your board of directors picks they pick the managers of the company, right? So each board member gets basically to pick a position or put a person that they choose in a position of power. So you then have governments like the Chinese Communist Party and the billionaires that have made a lot of money inside that party now can buy enough shares of a USA company to pick somebody and put somebody on the board of directors. And then those people on the board of directors are the ones that write the policies for companies like YouTube. So back previously to the Twitter files, like right after the Twitter files leaked was the first time that you could talk about the 2020 election and give somewhat of an honest opinion of what you thought, and you weren't going to lose your channel. But you know, if somebody can do something like interfere with an important event like that in a malicious way, and then they can deem anybody that talks about that basically a thought criminal, and they have the ability to silence that voice. And in society in general, we don't really go out into the community anymore. Like very few people I know are interested in like going over to their neighbor's house and sitting on the porch and having a conversation. Americans are so broke right now that I would say I would say on a fair estimate, 10 to 20% of Americans right now are debating between paying their taxes and feeding their children. And things aren't even bad yet. Gas is only $3.69 a gallon. And inflation's going to come back. It's already coming back. I've been saying this for a long time. I was saying there's no rate cuts coming. I was saying there was just no way. When you're shutting down the shipping through the Red Sea, and 70% of our freight goes through the Red Sea, and now they have to go and and it increases shipping costs by 700%. I mean, that's going to be felt, in the cost of goods, which is going to drive everything back up, whether it's the expansion of the money supply or just the actual added cost, the shipping. Like the price on everything's going to go up, and it is. We're seeing it right now. And if gas gets above $5 a gallon, it'll break probably 40% of Americans. 50% of Americans will be on the verge of being homeless.
It's for me, it's like fixing the money would solve all those problems in the long run. It's interesting to think of like what could happen in the short run, because even if we are now integrating slowly Bitcoin, probably a lot of the bad things that are already in the wheel probably are happening because this thing is so bad. But maybe let's talk to us. What can Bitcoin right now do on an individual level? Like, what do you see as like, why should someone that's already seeing this now and he's thinking like the same problem, like why is Bitcoin now the perfect solution for that? Like there are a lot of other options out there, like there's gold out there. I had someone on that is like 50-50 gold and Bitcoin. And there are maybe use cases for gold outside of having Bitcoin. There are people outside that say real estate, because it's such tax efficient, especially in Austria. A lot of people say that, and real estate is like really, really big in Austria. Why do you think like Bitcoin is the main thing?
I think your home was designed to be just that. I don't think it was ever supposed to be an investment vehicle. Like the price of your house isn't supposed to inflate, right? It's inflating because the currency is broken. So if you end up fixing the currency, the value of your home would never go up. It never should go up, right? The cost to maintain it, the cost to run it, the cost to everything should always go down, because a free market by design is deflationary. The value of your currency should go up, right? Like the value of your wealth, that you store your wealth. Now, short term, what can it do? It can educate you, right? Even if you just buy your first $100 worth of Bitcoin, you're going to want to learn more about it. And it's nothing that you can, I think that's the hardest part about Bitcoin, is it's nothing you're going to understand in a day, a week, a month. I mean, you'll probably can vouch for this, right? Every day you learn something new. You learn a new perspective. You learn more about the network, more about the protocol, more about what people are building onto it, more about what's happening with the secular economy that's being built around it. We've tried this right? Silver, right? I'm not against it. I got silver, I got gold, but not much, and I'm sure as hell not buying any more. But I had to go. I was sitting on a big pile of fiat. Before I bought this place, I was old enough to go through the '08 financial crisis and see how cheap everything got, right? And I was like, dude, the next one I'm gonna be ready for. So since then, I've basically been saving and saving and saving and saving, right? Stupid me. Trying to get in a position because I kept thinking it was going to happen. I thought it was going to happen in 2020. I thought it was going to happen in 2022. I thought it was going to happen in 2023. And then I realized that the fiat I'm holding onto is getting less and less valuable. So I go, screw it. At least this, I can go into basically any shop in America, any town, and trade this in for cash immediately and just have cash in hand and go buy whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm getting a little bit too big of a pile of cash. I'm going to get gold. I had to go to 4 pawn shops, right? I had to call like 10 before I finally found one that had coinage, because I wanted coinage, right? I wanted it to be easy. I wanted it to be recognizable, right? I wanted to be able to easily trade it in and out, and just the coinage is the way to go. So I had to go all over. And then after I got it, like this is just one of like 10 or 20 that I have of these things, right? So now I got to carry around all this gold and silver, right? We've tried this since the beginning of time. We've tried gold and silver coinage. At one point in the United States, in 1792 was probably the best example of when coinage could actually work and when it did work, and when our government only had the ability to mint coinage, which means like you could take raw silver and raw gold and go to the United States government and they would melt it down and they would turn it into like a silver eagle, a silver dollar, and it was verified, and there was a death penalty in America. If you were caught devaluing or debasing that coinage, you were killed immediately, right? Like on the spot. Like our government had a zero tolerance for people that manipulated the price of a currency, because our founding fathers knew. And George Washington, the first president of the United States, was adamant about never allowing a paper currency because of the damage that it can be done. So what Bitcoin can do short term for you is it can educate you. It can really help you wake up. And then it also it's motivation, right? Because when you're going and getting a second job, but like that second job is just to kind of maintain your standard of living, versus, okay, if I can keep struggling now, I could get that second job and I can put that into Bitcoin. It gives you hope for the future. It gives you hope for your children, and it gives you hope for your family. So that's just short term. And I think that's probably one of the greatest assets about Bitcoin is it helps educate people and it gives you hope, because without hope, all is lost. So you have to have something outside of your faith to kind of look forward to. And I think that's what Bitcoin is.
That's amazing. And exactly what you just said actually inspired me. I never said that on the podcast before. I'm working on it since like half a month. I think like I'm writing a book. It will be called like Build Your Own Freedom. And it will be about Bitcoin also, but Bitcoin will be just a side topic on that. And it goes in the direction that you just said, that the motivation stuff like that. I'm really looking forward to releasing that, but it's still a long time, but it's just felt like telling
read
you
it, man, as soon as you do.
Yeah, it will be a long time till I think hopefully I get it out this year. Maybe on my birthday, that would be great. But this is something that I'm really passionate about, like having Bitcoin as a base layer in your life, having Bitcoin as a foundation for yourself. Like you can basically put this and all of a sudden you can build on something. If you're like, I'm always comparing, I don't know if I did it also on your podcast when I spoke with you, when you have the sand line and when you have a solid street, like having a fiat standard is like running on sand or mud or something like that. And you will fall down, you feel all over, you will be dirty. The sand is holding you back. Yes, you can go forward. Yes, you can also run fast in sand and mud, but it's so much harder. And when you can do the same thing on a solid street with good running shoes and stuff like that, you're just like going ahead and you're running really fast. So it's fascinating what just money can do. Like in the end of the day, Bitcoin is money, and it's for money you have to work. So like if you don't do anything, you also don't get anything. And this proof of work concept where it gets redistributed because you get something when you do something nice, it's really beautiful and can do a lot of things for society. Maybe like let's go there. I ask this almost most of my guests. I actually ask this. What do you see, like, when we maybe it's now focus on America, let's see wonder happens, and there will be a president that actually tries to adopt the Bitcoin standard. They are trying to get on a sound money standard. They're trying to fix it. They're trying to go the El Salvador route a little bit. 10 years, 15 years from now, what will like America on like a sound money Bitcoin standard look like? Like paint us a picture.
I think the first thing that it does is it levels the playing field. It gives the people, for the first time in all of history, something that's incorruptible, it's so hard to put a value on. For the first time in human history, man has created something that's incorruptible, beyond the reach of the most powerful tyrannical governments in world history, which is the United States government at this point. So uh, giving that power back to the people, it will just create monumental change. It looks like a world where your government is allowed X amount of dollars, and in exchange for those dollars, they need to provide services that the world actually wants or that their citizens actually need. I think it cuts down the overloaded bloat of government by just forcing them to be responsible on a budget. And when every penny that your government is spending, and I understand that they'll have to have certain things, there'll be Bitcoin privacy, and there'll be a way for the government to, have secret military operations where there's certain things that I understand they have to have money for, and they have to have it off the books and whatever. But that should be such a fine amount of money, where like right now, we don't, we give things like NASA, which isn't even a government organization, which is just this entity that's created, this private entity that's never been audited. And we give them billions and billions of dollars, $26 billion. To put that into perspective, an entire part of a state in Hawaii got burnt to the ground. Our government couldn't give those citizens $700 each. It's now 6 months later, and those people are still homeless. They're still living on the streets, and they couldn't even get $700, but we're going to give $26.7 billion to NASA this year. And they've never been audited. We give, $250 billion to Ukraine. And that's one of the things that our government has done, is just they're extracting your wealth by the ability to print money out of thin air. So I forget who says it, probably Jeff Booth or Seyr or somebody, if, a year ago or whenever the Ukraine war started, if right before that started, Joe Biden said, you know what, Ukraine needs $250 billion. So what we're going to do is until you make 5,000, you're going to have to go into work for the next week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, however long it takes you to make $5,000. We're going to take all of it. You're going to get $0. And then we're also going to increase your taxes by 20%. So we're going to take another 20% of taxes. What would happen? There would be a revolution in the streets before tomorrow morning. Ukraine would have never got a penny, because we would have never agreed to it. Where now they can just print money out of thin air. So then you go from these endless wars and these pointless wars where I think a majority of civilization is waking up, whether you're Christian, American, Indian, Muslim, Chinese. Like, dude, we love each other, man. The color of your skin doesn't matter. Your ethnicity doesn't matter. Your race doesn't matter. Like, none of it matters to us. And I think enough of civilization is waking up going, wow, there's a very small group of elite people that do not have our best interests at heart, are no longer doing what's best for our nation. It's always what's best for their pocketbooks. So I think that's what America looks like. I think America has the opportunity to right a lot of wrongs that we've done throughout history. I think they have the ability to show a nation what happens when you cut back on government bureaucracy and regulations, and you allow a free market. And I think that would be like the best hope for America, would be one day we actually have a free market in America where your government serves the people. But it's always going to be a small government. So that would be my best case for America, is we one day get back to sound money. We have a free market in here. We got a lot of government, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of corruption. And I think that it can all be fixed in a single week or month of the president has to declassify everything. So that's what they're terrified the most of, is that Trump has to just get back into power, day one, declassify everything. Because we have these government agencies that classify everything as top secret and classified. And that classified evidence is the evidence that we need to prosecute these people. So they're either destroying evidence or they're classifying evidence, so that way we don't have access to it because it's technically a classified document. Well, in America, we have laws that prevent that. We have a constitution that nobody ever follows because we don't have anybody that'll prosecute. So those people are handpicked by the president. So the president has handpicked people that basically prevents him from ever being, you know, exposed or anything of the sort. So if Trump gets back into office and he just declassifies everything, and he has somebody in a position of power that he appoints that will prosecute these people, you're probably going to watch. I would probably think about 80 to 90% of the politicians in this country end up in prison, which is why again, if we go back to your question about 2024, I just don't see it happening, because if it happens, even the people that are in power right now are most likely going to be investigated for. I mean, you've seen all the people I was reading off. I mean, it's illegal to insider trade, and we just look the other way because nobody's willing to prosecute it. But if we have somebody that's willing to prosecute it, we can be the example to the world of what happens when the people take back power from their government and it's returned back to the people, and we actually hold the people accountable for the crimes that they've committed.
That's amazing. It's and what you speak is the pure truth. And I've just thought of one thing while you spoke, is like the silent death that we experience, the silence, theft and death, basically, like both. Because when you have this inflation, when you have money printing, and when you talked about the revolution that would go on if we would actually have to tax people for the money they send to Ukraine, there would be definitely people on the street. Maybe they would have also, like on a Bitcoin standard, they maybe would have also sent money. I don't know if they even would have, but the money would have been so much smaller, because maybe you can tax them like 0.5% more. But when you go to like, oh, let's tax them 20 or 30% more, then you come to a territory like, no, we don't want that. Some don't even want 0.5%. Some don't want 10%. But with 20, 30%, like 90% or 95% of the population is basically saying no, thank you, or maybe even 99% of the population. And this is where this silent theft with inflation comes in, which is such a cruel thing. And I just got this like 2 years after I got Bitcoin. I was getting all in Bitcoin, and then I slowly got educated by Bitcoin Maxis. Actually, it was really interesting for me how I got like shaped my view by Bitcoin Maxis, because they were just speaking the truth over and over and over again. And I was like, oh shit, they actually write about stuff. And then I became myself one. So that's really interesting. And we are kind of opening this topic a little bit when we come to our end routine. The question today is really, really interesting. I've even thought about getting the end routine as the first question, but let's keep it for the end. But before, I wanted to ask you something besides Bitcoin, besides everything you're doing. Is there anything you're currently extremely passionate about? Like I think every person that is growing and getting stronger every day has always something that they are learning currently, they're currently passionate about. Is there some topic you can share with us that you're currently really passionate about and digging deep into it?
You know, I'm a filmmaker at heart, right? Like the podcasting all was just second nature. You know, I'm a videographer and a photographer, and I love doing those kind of things. So like right now I'm working on documentaries. Like that's something that I've always been really, really passionate about just, you know, sharing that raw truth. I'm getting ready to leave on actually in like 2 weeks to start filming a documentary called Treason. And it's going to go through and show you from a raw first person experience of what treason actually looks like when your government basically turns its back on you, and not just what treason looks like, but what would another 4 years of treason look like? It would be the end of America. And we're going to be able to show you that. And, you know, the politicians that have taken so much from us, these are low IQ individuals that, you know, that just don't offer anything of value through the world. And giving the ability to show people that, you know, our founding, we have the Constitution in America. And it's probably one of the greatest pieces of literature ever wrote. And if we followed the Constitution the way that it was wrote, and it was designed to keep government small. It wasn't supposed to be easy for them to pass new laws and take away your liberties and freedoms. But what they've realized is that they can create regulatory bodies like the SEC, the FBI, the DOJ, the IRS, right? Congress couldn't pass a law to basically tax you or take more of your money. So then they created the IRS, then they created the Federal Reserve, then they created the FDA, which regulates food. Then we created the SEC, which regulates markets, right? And if you notice, like those, every single one of those bodies came out. If you go back and look before they came out, before they were created, it was like Congress was head to head. They couldn't pass any laws. They couldn't take any more away of your freedom. So then they basically figured out a way, which is normally by a designed attack, whether that's a terrorist attack, whether that's a banking crisis, whether that's whatever. They create the crisis, and then in comes the government to save the day. We need this regulatory body to make sure that you're staying safe. The small, investor, right? We're going to make sure that you're protected. And really, they've never made sure we're protected. So I think just giving people like a raw look at the world and speaking truth and just developing those friendships. And then from there, the next one will be on Bitcoin. So I'm doing this one on treason. That'll come out by August or September, right before the 2024 election. And the next one I'm going to do is going to be on Bitcoin. And I think if you see the documentary Leave the World Behind, it's about like what happens when like we get like attacked by like a cyber attack or a major infrastructure attack where they take over the internet and radios and cars are crashing and all the things that most likely are going to happen this summer. But I want to do one that's called Leave the Fiat World Behind. And it's going to be on Bitcoin, and it's going to be a documentary of just showing people what Bitcoin is. Like now we have El Salvador as a perfect shining example to the world of what, could happen. So I want to go down to El Salvador, and I want to go to these other countries that are dealing with tyrannical governments, and the people are really standing up and adopting Bitcoin. And I just want to make a documentary on Bitcoin because that's what I'm the most passionate about. I think it helps educate people, and there's no greater gift that you can give yourself or your family or your future grandchildren than taking the time right here, right now, today to understand Bitcoin. And I tell every people, and I'll wrap it up on this, right? I always ask people, when was the first time you heard about Bitcoin? People say 13, 14, 15, 17, 20. It doesn't matter when, right, Robin? If you would have immediately that day spent 2 hours a day, 2 hours a week, 2 hours a month, doesn't matter the time period. If you would have dedicated a percentage of your time to studying Bitcoin, without a doubt, everybody that does would have bought it. So that means you would have bought it. That means your family would be in an exponentially better position today. And if I could have done that for the last 15 years and it didn't matter when you say it or said it, what do you think is going to happen for the next 15 years? So for the next, from this point right here, right now, you could, if you start adopting Bitcoin and studying Bitcoin, you will be able to look back and pinpoint an exact moment in your life when everything changed for the better. And that's so hard to do in retrospect. Like even people it's easy to do when things went bad, whether you were drinking and driving, right? And you got pulled over and you got a DUI or you crashed your car and you broke your leg. And that changed the trajectory of your life. It's easy to look back and pinpoint those moments in life when something bad happened. It's even harder to look back and pinpoint those when something good happened. And it's even harder to do that in real time when it is happening. Some people talk about the day they met their girlfriend, they knew instantly when they saw her, right? Like their life was going to change. But, you can do that right here, right now with Bitcoin. And I guarantee you, it's the only thing I can guarantee you, because people are always going to serve their self-interest. And that's what Bitcoin, at the end of the day, if you doubt Bitcoin, but you believe that people are always going to serve their self-interest, Bitcoin will always serve that self-interest better than anything else. And that's it.
That's very true. I'm looking forward to that documentary. I'm loving it. And I think when we look back in Bitcoin, and it gets now more and more easy. Like when you look back at 2012, 2013, it was kind of hard to get into Bitcoin because there was not as good of an education, but then also the reward was massively. And now the point is so interesting because the education gets easier and easier. How many podcasts, books, stuff like that is out there that you can get educated basically on Bitcoin in a weekend. If you dedicate your time, if you find the right sources, you can get educated really nicely on Bitcoin in a weekend, and you know a little bit about it, so much about it that you can trust it, and you can go ahead and buy some and then get educated in the following weeks, which is amazing. And then we are also in another really interesting point where we're like in this 10% adoption area, where when the S-curve adoption hits this 10% mark, it usually really drives the adoption, really goes parabolic. So like the first 12 years or something like that, it needs to get to like 10%, around about that. And we're getting to closer to this point of 10%. And then the next 80% of adoption are happening in the same time frame. So it's an interesting time to get now into Bitcoin and educate yourself in Bitcoin. And if you just listen to it and just watch it go by, the next 15 years, you will regret it really hard, I think. But that's just my opinion. But I think you should really get at least educated on it, so you don't miss out on the fun in the next 15 years.
Yeah. And you know what too is if you have kids, man, in the United States, I don't know about but the country, but for since basically 1913, so our great grandparents left this country in a worse position for their children. Our grandparents, worse position for their children. My parents, right, worse position for me. That buck stops here, right? The second you start adopting Bitcoin, you're saying that I want to leave this world in a better place for my children than I found it. And if that means I have to sacrifice right here, right now, so that my children never have to go through what I've gone through, then I'm going to do it. And I think that's the big picture that everybody around the world is going to see. Yeah, it might suck if you own no Bitcoin right now and you're trying to play catch up. But you want to know what? It's going to suck even more when Bitcoin's 250,000 or a million or 10 million or a billion, right? And it's going that way. So you need to really take a look at the people that have been advising you not to buy Bitcoin. If you live in the United States and you're watching this, Nancy Pelosi, Elizabeth Warren, Peter Schiff, right? These are the people that have gotten filthy rich, insider trading. Nancy Pelosi went from a net worth of like, $100,000 to now like $150 million. And she's never produced anything of value ever. No company, no business, no nothing, just $175,000 salary from the US government and has a net worth of $160 million. And you're working 2 jobs, right? We can't keep doing this to our children. We can't keep looking the other way and ignoring it and thinking somebody's going to fix it, because that's how we got here. So at the very end of the day, Bitcoin is hope. And I really hope that everybody hears this message and at least gives it an opportunity and takes the time to study it, because it's the greatest gift you can give your family and our children moving forward.
Amazing. And now we can finally get to the end routine. I'm looking forward to your answer to that one. And if we now, and the question, like we have this end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest is. And the question for you is, if we approach hyper-bitcoinization where no fiat is left, which entity of the fiat world will be the last entity to be destroyed? Like what fiat institution, what fiat department, what fiat entity will be the one entity that clings on to the power as long as humanly possible? Like central banks, governments. Like what do you think the entity will be?
I think it'd be Russia. I think Russia provides the highest quality of living for their citizens as far as their government. I think they're a wealth producer. I think they produce things that the rest of the world needs and wants. And I think that they are stealing from their citizens the least, if that makes sense. I think that you understand what I'm saying. I think that, the money that their government is taxing and taking from them, every single person that I've ever interviewed or spoke to from Russia speaks very highly of Putin. And the people that I've seen have a fairly good standard of living over there, considering he protects their border, he protects their property rights, he protects their individual liberties. He's, a Christian or Catholic faith-based. And I think that that's going to go a long way, because to get off the fiat standard, you have to, your country has to despise their government and they have to despise their standard of living. So I think that countries like that protect people's property rights are going to be the ones that are going to fail the slowest, I guess you should say.
Yeah, definitely. Did you, side question, did you watch the Tucker Carlson interview?
I sure did. Absolutely.
That was a crazy one, and especially the mainstream media reaction to it, how angry they were that he got it and he interviewed it. Like, it was really interesting for me to watch, even as an European that has like nothing to do with it, because it was an American interviewing Russia. But even here, people were like outraged that someone spoke with another human being.
It's mind-blowing considering that like every major journalist in the mainstream media has interviewed bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, all of these world leaders during war times, right? And that was okay. But it's when it goes against their narrative. We had interviewed Tara Reid. She was something by a president, our current president, right? Like this woman fled our country because she was afraid that the three-letter agency was going to do her harm, right? Like air quotes on everything, but you guys get this person fled to Russia. So there's like 6 months, maybe 8 months before that Tucker interview, I got to interview an American who fled to Russia. And the videos that she was showing me of how beautiful it is there, she was going into the stores shopping, it was safe, like everybody was happy. And she's like, it was like a complete paradigm. She couldn't believe it. And she's I don't know, what do they call that when they flee the country? Not a refugee. Yeah, political refugee, asylum seeker. I don't know what you call it, but she fled from political persecution. So she was allowed to basically go there and stay there. And she never has to worry about our government coming after her, I guess.
Definitely, yeah. That interview was really interesting for me. But yeah, it was a real pleasure talking with you, Ryan. I think you have one of the interesting views in Bitcoin because you bring something new to the table. I love your show. I love what you're doing also on Twitter. And for people now that watch you and want to watch more of you, or want to ask you questions, or want to kind of get in touch with you, where can people find you the best way?
You can find me on Ryan Matta Media. Over on X is probably the easiest way to find me. On Rumble, Ryan Matta. On YouTube, Ryan Matta. Any platform, just Ryan Matta should pull me up.
Perfect. And thank you, Ryan, for being on. It was a pleasure.
Robin, it was an honor to be here, man. And hopefully I can get you back on the show again when you're not as busy, man. I appreciate you coming back on.
Perfect.
God bless you, my friend.